The Devonian period. It is also known as the Age of Fishes. It occurred about 460 million to 358 million years ago. Geographically, the Gondwana supercontinent continued to drift northward. There was also a collision between the Euro-America continent with the Siberia continent, and that would later become Great Britain. Most of North America at this time was still underwater. The interior of all the continents were very warm and dry. It continued to also be a period of extensive reef building. One new species of animals that lived in the oceans was the placoderms, or armored fish. There was a great diversification of this animal in the oceans, and they were the dominant marine predators. They were very simple creatures. They had a hard outer shell. They had simple jaws with no true teeth. Instead, they had bony structures that they used to crush their prey. They could grow as big as 33 feet in length. However, their time on Earth was very limited. It only lasted throughout the Devonian period, and by the end of the Devonian period, they were becoming extinct. The Devonian period also saw the development of two new groups of fish. One group had bones, teeth, swim bladders, and gills. The ray-finned fish were ancestors of our modern fish. There was also the lobe-finned fish. They were different from the ray-finned fish in their bone structure. They had very fleshy pelvic and pectoral fins, and the muscles that they use in those fins is what they use to move and swim with. Some of these fish could breathe air through spiracles in the skull, and they were the ancestors of later tetrapods. Today, the lungfish is the only lobed-finned fish still in existence. By the end of the Devonian period, we also saw the beginning of cartilaginous fish, such as sharks and rays. Ammonites were also prevalent during this time period. Ammonites are a type of cephalopods. One example was an orthoceras, which had a straight 6-inch shell, or the anatoceras, which had the coiled shell 2 inches in diameter. Ammonites had a chamber within their shells that they used to regulate air. They could use it as a ballast to move up and down throughout the water. Ammonite fossils are very prevalent and easy to find. Here are 2 examples of ammonite fossils from the Devonian period. By this time, most of the trilobites had become extinct. However, there was still one species, the spiny trilobite, that still existed in these Devonian waters. They had long porcupine spikes on them, although nobody really knows how or why these ended up developing. It is theorized that maybe they were used as a weapon or as self-defense. In the interior of the warm and dry continents, lycophytes, horsetails, and ferns grew to enormous size and became the first forests. As there were more plants on Earth, there was an increase in oxygen that allowed for the future development of terrestrial animals, or land animals. The CO2 was depleted, however, and it helped to cool the climate. Some people have theorized that the cooling of the climate may have caused the extinctions that occurred at the end of the Devonian period. As there was more plant life, there was also a huge growth in insect population, with millipedes, centipedes, and arachnids. We also began to see the very first tetrapods. The word tetrapod comes from the Greek word tetrapoda, which means four-legged. Tetrapods may be the link between lobed-fin fish and early amphibians. The Tiktaalik rosea tetrapod was a fish like pelvis. It had large, strong hind limbs and a crocodile head. It had the ability to have a movable neck, and it had nostrils that allowed it to have the ability to breathe air. As you finish this lesson, I want you to take one last look at this section of the timeline. Notice the red lifelines, the corals that continued to develop, the sea scorpions that declined, the continued growth of sea lilies and radiolaria, the influx of marsh plants that eventually would move into land plants, the increase of the cartilaginous fish, and also the lifeline of the armored fish, which, relatively speaking to the timeline, was a very short period of time, and they very much disappeared by the end of the Devonian period. We saw the development in the lesson of the ammonites, the cephalopods with spiral shells, the increase of insects, and finally our spiny trilobite, never to be seen again.